Hey guys, there's some operating systems that, for better or worse, rightly or wrongly, just have a terrible reputation. Windows Vista immediately jumps to mind. I don't know very many people who truly liked Windows Vista. It was a similar story with Windows Millennium Edition. Now, this video is not about either of those operating systems. Now, today I want to talk about MS-DOS 4.0. DOS 4.0 is widely regarded as the worst version of DOS ever produced by Microsoft. It's allegedly horribly buggy, crashes left and right, wasn't compatible with half of the software that was out there. Basically, if you believe the internet, if you install MS-DOS 4.0, it'll immediately delete all of your data, sleep with your wife, and steal your car. Since I'm single, I don't have a car, and all of my data is backed up, I figured I'd install MS-DOS 4.0 and try it for myself. So I have my 386 DX40 with 8 megs of memory, a Gotek floppy emulator, and a compact flash card. The installation is a little bit different from DOS 3.3. If you saw my video on installing DOS 3.3, you remember we booted from the installation disk and simply ran the select command. Well, the installer for DOS 4 is a little bit more complex. I'm using a 360K version of DOS 4, and I believe there were 6 disks in this distribution. Now, I'm not entirely sure what they mean here, but I'm going to go with balance DOS function with program workspace. I'm not going to do anything special with the keyboard, and we're installing on the C drive. Now, by the way, I'm actually using a 512 meg compact flash card. That was one of the new features in DOS 4. You remember DOS 3 was limited to a 32 meg partition. If you had a larger hard drive, you'd simply make multiple partitions. DOS 4 allowed for larger partitions, although there were some reports of issues with larger hard drives and partition table corruption. That's one of the issues that I ran into in researching this video. A lot of these reports are anecdotal. It's surprisingly difficult to find solid, reliable information on specific bugs in the OS. Now, you may have noticed I chose to install the DOS shell. This was a new feature introduced in DOS 4.0. DOS shell was basically a menu system that sat on top of the operating system. It was intended to make DOS a little bit more user-friendly. Now, I've already gone through and installed a couple of programs in the background, so I'm going to make a link to Quick Basic, and we'll check and make sure that works. Yes, indeed, I can access Quick Basic. And I have my DOS utilities here. Now, this really wasn't a new idea. It was fairly common with older versions of DOS. Systems administrators would create a menu system specific to their use case. That way, the users wouldn't need any great familiarity with the operating system. They could simply select the item that they wanted from the list. Now, in addition, we have a file manager. In fact, let's take a look under C:/files. I have 9 compressed files in here, and each of those contains 1,000 2-byte files. We're going to use those for an experiment. So first, let's go to a command prompt. Now the DOS shell is actually still running. I've simply gone to a command prompt within DOS shell. And first I'm going to copy those compressed files into the C:/src directory. Okay, that's our source directory. And then I'm going to decompress those under source and copy them over into the destination directory. So we have 9,000 files copied from the source directory into the destination directory. That copied successfully. Let's go back into DOS shell. And we have our first indication of an issue. Number of files exceed maximum. We'll simply ignore the grammatical issue there. And you can see those files under the source directory and not under the destination directory. There should be 9,000 files under source and 9,000 under destination. So there's definitely some unusual behavior from this DOS shell. Okay, let's pop back out of the DOS shell. And I'll do a directory of C:/dst. Yeah, we definitely have files in there. Let's delete them. And we'll go back into the DOS shell. Now this time I'm going to try and copy those files using the DOS shell from the source directory into destination. Yep, there's our maximum files error again. Destination directory is this time most definitely empty. And going into source, let's do a select all and copy. Okay, change the destination to DST. And it indicates it's going to copy 4,015 files. Now remember, there are 9,000 files in that directory. Skipping forward a little bit. File cannot be copied to itself. Now that destination directory was empty, so there's nothing in there to be overwritten. There's no reason why this program should be indicating the file can't be copied to itself. So I'm going to cancel that copy. Oh, we've got some artifact on the screen there. And my mouse doesn't appear to be working anymore. Let's try the keyboard. Okay, DOS shell appears to have crashed. Yeah, I can do a directory. We are back in DOS. Okay, so moving right along, let's check the available conventional memory. That was another common complaint with DOS 4. It used considerably more conventional memory. That's the first 640K of memory that would commonly be used by real-mode DOS applications. We'll do an actual comparison later in the video. But for the moment, let's go back into DOS shell and pick up where we left off. And no, we appear to be locked. Okay, even a Control-Alt-Delete is not responding. I actually have to hit the reset button. So we're back up and running. Let's load a common TSR program. That's a terminate and stay resident program. Specifically, I have a copy of Borland Sidekick. It's a handy little collection of utilities that pop up whenever you hit Control-Alt on the keyboard. So let's fire up DOS shell and see if these two play nicely together. And that would appear to be a no. Switching from Borland Sidekick back into DOS shell, you can see we get some video artifacting. The program didn't crash, but it certainly doesn't look healthy. So there's one last thing I want to look at. Let's bring up the config sys, and I'm going to create a RAM drive. Now I have to confess I'm cheating here. This is a copy of MS-DOS Edit from 622. I didn't want to use the Edlin, the line editor that came along with this version of DOS. If you've ever used Edlin, it's pretty hateful. So I've loaded the extended memory manager to give DOS access to the massive 8 megs of memory in this computer. And I'm creating a 4 meg RAM drive. So after a reboot, let's go back into DOS shell. And you can see we do indeed have a D drive. Okay, so I'm going to copy the contents of the C:/DOS directory into a D:/DOS. Now, of course, the benefit to a RAM drive, RAM is much faster than hard drive access. So if you were doing anything really disk intensive, you'd see a massive increase in speed. The caveat, of course, being if it's stored in RAM, that's volatile memory. Everything is lost on reboot. There were some reports of RAM drive being unstable, but personally, for me at least, everything seemed to work fine. So I've cleared out the autoexec.bat and the config sys, freed up as much conventional memory as I could, and it seems to work fine. So most of the issues that I've encountered today had something to do with the DOS shell. Whenever I avoided DOS shell, things seemed to work relatively well. I was always running a little low on conventional memory, but aside from that, it seems to be a relatively stable operating system. There were some anecdotal reports of memory leaks, where DOS4 would not release memory after a program stopped running, but I didn't encounter anything like that myself. Now again, this may be specific to my use case, but I simply didn't see it. Now, by comparison, if I bring up a copy of DOS 3.3, let's see how much conventional memory was available immediately after a fresh install. And as you can see, we've got approximately 600,000 bytes. The best I was able to obtain with DOS4 was 583, and at one point it was actually down to 475,000 bytes of available conventional memory. So, in summary, was DOS4 really as bad as it was made out to be? Honestly, I would have to say no. At least not with my particular hardware. If you avoid the DOS shell and carefully tailor the config sys to maximize conventional memory, it is possible to make DOS4 a perfectly usable system. Now, that having been said, given the choice between DOS 3.3 and DOS 4.0, I really don't see any compelling reason to upgrade to DOS 4. So if you enjoyed this one, feel free to like and subscribe. Drop a comment down below. Did any of you actually use DOS 4? And if so, what were your experiences? Beyond that, as always, thanks for watching.